Hello, and welcome to this eSchool News webcast. My name's Andrew Barber. I'm a senior contributing editor here at eSchool News, and I'll be acting as the moderator of today's presentation. It's sponsored by Jamf Software, and it's titled, How to Ace Your Apple School Manager Integration. Now, before I hand things over to Dave Saltmarsh, who is our speaker today, let me just take a few moments to highlight a couple of items. First, today's event will be recorded. In a couple of days, we'll send out an email to everyone on the webinar today. It contains a link to the recorded event, and you'll also be able to download a PDF of the presentation from that same email. And second, please ask questions, and don't feel as if you have to wait until the end. At any time during the presentation, if you have a question, just type it into the Q&A box on your console and hit the submit button. I'm sure we'll have at least 15 minutes at the end when we can address your questions. We also have a chat function which can be launched via the blue group chat icon at the bottom of your screen. There are two blue buttons. It's the one with the sort of the chat bubble depicted. Use chat to talk among yourselves or to contact me or the eSchool News team if you have any technical issues or other concerns. But please don't use the chat to ask our speaker questions. Dave is just not going to have time to monitor the chat while he gives his presentation. So if you have a question, please use the Q&A panel instead. Now with that out of the way, let me formally introduce our speaker, Dave Saltmarsh. He's the educational evangelist at Jamf Software, and he's a career educator who over the course of 18 years worked as a classroom teacher turned IT and library director in both Arizona and in Maine. And in addition to managing all facets of information technology, he's led implementations in one-to-one computers for students, as well as handheld programs, and is really focused on personalized learning. And over the last 5 years, he's traveled globally and gained a worldwide perspective on the use of technology in education and business. Dave has a master's degree in instructional technology and has earned COSN's Certified Educational Technology Leader distinction. Welcome, Dave. It's an honor to have you here today.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I appreciate the opportunity and your introduction. I'm very excited to share with you some of the exciting things that are going on in the Apple world that Jamf is involved in. And while I have a slide up here of our organization, I really didn't intend to get too much into what we do. Really, this presentation is about how mobile device management companies, such as Jamf Software, are truly integrated in with Apple's new Apple School Manager and the services they're providing and how they work really well together and what you need to know. I am very proud of Jamf's experience of being Apple only and being very centered on that notion. We're very proud of our zero-day support stuff, and we've been supporting the Apple School Manager and the Apple 9.3 features since they came out. I was pretty excited last week when we released our update to support the new iOS and even the new Mac OS ahead of it coming out. And I think that's the kind of thing you want to look at as you prepare for all this is how well are you going to be able to take full advantage of what Apple's offering and their future offerings? And as an educator who's been involved in technology for 20-something years, and I've seen things evolve, and I'm excited to say there's no better time to be jumping in. And this presentation is probably a little bit more for those that are just jumping in. We know from our millions of customers that people are at different points in their integration. And if you're brand new, I think you're going to get that insight today for things you should be caring about. And often, the people I'm talking to, and when I have a live audience, I can look around the room and see it, and I'd see the titles. I know today I'm likely talking to what I like to call the non-it crowd, the perhaps not necessarily in a role of technology within your organization. Because you've been doing a lot of management with iPads or devices, and what Apple's created is an ability to share some capabilities with those people in roles that aren't necessarily IT. So we're going to get into what Apple is doing a little bit in education to see this change. We're going to talk about how to prepare, how to get ready, what you should be thinking about, and then get into what are the things you're going to have the options to do now with configuring devices. Certainly purchases and thinking and that long-term capability of doing things zero touch. We've been those of us who started off with iPad touches with using iTunes U and connecting a bunch of devices and then using carts and Apple Configurator and physically touching things, we've migrated gradually. If you're jumping in the mix, there's none of that anymore. When we get into deployment, you're going to see how you can do this from purchasing order to opening out of a box to get into the hands of your students and your teachers. And that's really the magical part we want to show to make sure you're ready for that. If you're migrating, if you've been like I have, been knee-deep in Apple stuff since back in the 80s, and certainly all of the iPad ecosystem, you've seen it evolve. So some of you that are migrating, you might have some things that you have to work on to switch over, but the beautiful thing is you will get into this new phase eventually, and certainly if you're starting out again, I'm trying to help those people the most today. You're going to hear me repeat multiple times. My best friend in my school department was my Apple account manager and my systems engineer. I didn't start a project that I didn't have them involved in to begin with, and I'm going to encourage that along the way. As you start asking me some questions, I'll try to help, but I'm certainly going to encourage you to, just like at Jamf, and I can't speak to other device management companies, you have a named person to call. And having been on the other side, knowing that I'm calling someone named Jen that is going to know my system, that's the same thing you have at Apple pretty much. Involve that systems engineer as you're planning to roll this stuff out, if you're getting into this for the first time. And certainly if you're going through the migration path. So let's look at what Apple's doing now and how we've come about. We've certainly seen that shift, which is a wonderful shift since the 60s, where as a librarian, libraries started out using technology. In the 80s and the early 90s, there was a lot of teachers. Stuff shifted to technology departments. However, especially when we started implementing iPads, we started seeing that shift go to non-IT roles. So Apple has found a way to provide more access into schools because we have more people with their hands in the pie or in the management of the day-to-day. That is ultimately empowering teachers. And so they brought this ability for people really close to that practitioner to hand off things, not to mention they've stepped into the classroom management part. And it really can come down to the better use of your funding, having more people utilizing the tools. When it comes down to purchasing software, we call apps today. In the iOS world, we're going to call apps. But 7 years ago, I was buying software in my organization. And we've seen processes evolve that are taking another step for schools to purchase content and then the distribution of that content appropriately to the right student. So we're going to see these abilities start off with a preparation phase that in the past may have sent people in multiple directions. We'll eventually get into getting things personalized for the individual student and ongoing capabilities. However, that preparation phase is the first part that we want more people involved. We want the teachers involved, the building principals. We want the coordinator of the STEM Academy to be involved in the decision-making and even some of the capabilities that may have been in the hands of IT. Because while you used to have to go, if you've been managing Apple devices and iPads for the last few years, you'd go to a separate place to do what was called device enrollment program. You would enter that. And we're going to talk a little bit more about it. But that is where you would get your devices at the moment of purchase so that you can assign them to your organization. And then ultimately into the device management capability system, that like the Jamf Casper suite, so that you can work with those devices. The volume purchase aspect of the Apple's school manager used to be a separate entity where you would go in and you could buy apps or books at bulk. And in the app side, if you buy a certain number, most app companies give you a discounted price. So we're going to want to be able to do all that in one place, this new portal to be able to do that. And it adds this other element of the managed Apple IDs. And for years, and certainly back in the iPod Touch days with how do we get apps onto things and evolved in the Apple ID became such an identity for individuals. Because there's so many practical aspects where the Apple ID comes into place. But we have to admit, having been a 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade teacher, 6th grade teacher, I worked with a lot of students that were 13 or under. And working that system to be able to get accounts for students so they could do the day-to-day things was challenging. And it should be, because we have a lot of concerns with students' privacy and their safety, and we want to have them gradually earn privileges and capabilities as they learn to use technology. This new managed Apple ID really helps get past that 13 and under, because it can eliminate the purchasing capabilities, the things that had concerns of if you had these IDs in the hands of students. So Apple has found a way to put all that in one great spot. The other aspect that Apple's really helping with, and I like to follow the trends in the news a lot, and I remember months ago, I don't know if it was a year, where Apple acquired a company called LearnSprout. There was a lot of speculation with what they were doing. LearnSprout is a great company to help Apple be really knee-deep in understanding how schools can get their data that usually is in what's called an SIS system or student information system, from that system into other things. And when we start talking about setting up the iPads and getting them assigned to specific students and putting in the specific classes for use with Apple's Classroom app, or perhaps you're going to do it down the road with iTunes U and potentially other aspects, Apple is really working on this aspect. And having owned in school organizations multiple student information systems, I remember the days when Apple owned PowerSchool. As a PowerSchool administrator, I went to PowerSchool U. So Apple does get this stuff and how vitally important it is. What they're doing now is they're finding a way to integrate through Apple School Manager your student information system so it can get tied into someone's device management, like the Casper Suite, to help with singling down to these devices to get that personalized experience. They currently have integration with a couple SISs where it's just a direct integration, but they also have this manual import capability that, for myself, for years, this is how we got things done. Beginning of the school year, I did a lot of the manual imports. Then it got to the point where I do the weeklies. Apple is working with the different SIS providers. I'm probably going to get questions. I expect to get questions on who are they currently immediately integrated with. That's one I absolutely would encourage you. Apple has some great information on their website. They also have their system engineers. I would talk to your student information system. I mean, I know Infinite Campus is integrated, and there's another one, SunGuard, for usually used in high ed. But you can probably anticipate that the larger ones are going to be coming on at some point in the near future. But I would certainly be checking with your own company, and then checking constantly in with Apple. However, you always have this capability of getting in the data, importing it in, and putting it into the system so we can get rolling right away. So there's nothing prohibiting you. Back into the preparing phase, we need to talk about how you're planning to use these devices. Pretty much never start a conversation without the why. What are you trying to accomplish, certainly, but also why, and then what are you planning to do? And you're using one-to-one, and you're using that with iPads. Some of these things pertain to you. Some of things don't matter quite as much, and you have decisions to make. If you're going to the shared use model, and quite frankly, there's a uppercase S, capital S, shared use. We've been sharing iPads since they came out. The potential of moving to that model where students get the same personalized experience on their iPad when it's shared between students as a one-to-one student, where they log in and they have their data, some of their data is retained or comes down and is in a secure environment that when they get back out of that iPad, the next student can't get in and touch their data or accidentally delete their file. This is this new shared use that has some pieces that are tied to this Apple School Manager that we want to make sure we understand as we move forward. And of course, some people have the student-owned, and in some cases we can do a little bit of stuff with student-owned devices. And quite frankly, I haven't been in too many districts lately that aren't a mixture, that don't have all three of these going in with their iPads or their Macs and then other devices from one school to the next. So we'll dive a little bit into that, realizing that depending on which one you're doing, you may use a different aspect of Apple School Manager. New this year, I mentioned that shared iPad experience or that personalized experience, and imagine a student being able to just tap on the picture because they were on this iPad recently. Getting this set up in the back end is why we're using Apple School Manager and you're relying on a mobile device management system. But imagine that student just tapping on their name and it booting up and remembering where they left off, remembering the files they had. And the great thing is if a student hadn't used that iPad recently, they're just going to go in. This is where the managed Apple ID really comes into play. For shared use model, for a student to be able to go onto an iPad and use this shared system where it's going to cache, remember some of their information, or go get it, we're going to rely on this new app, this managed Apple ID. That's a crucial component if you're planning to use this capability. For the one-to-one, and I know I skipped over that slide, we don't have to have that managed Apple ID to use one-to-one. There may be some other reasons you want to use it. It could come down to the road of iTunes U, and who knows what other aspects. So there's value to an Apple ID. The managed piece right now comes down really for this shared use model. Moving on to getting the devices configured, because you've decided on the model you're going to use. You've gone into Apple School Manager and you have those accounts. Now, again, if you're a pre-existing Apple customer, you may have those accounts separate, and they need to be migrated and merged together. But if you started off, you've got one great place, and you can have multiple roles within your organization. So you've gotten past that. Now we want to look at configuring the devices. I'm going to go ahead, and I tend to be a little nonlinear, so I'm going to try to switch slides here if I can. You can just bear with me for just a moment. I'm actually going to push this one to you, a little out of order. We've done something with Apple School Manager where you've got the devices, device enrollment aspect. The key piece to that is you've purchased devices, you've gone ahead and said you want these devices and you want to assign it to a device management system, the Casper Suite. And this is that part where you connect Apple School Manager to your MDM. At Jamf, we do this by adding a JSS, we call it Jamf Software Server Public Key, to Apple School Manager, and adding the Apple School Manager Server Token. That's already gotten a little too technical for me, but basically we're connecting them to. Once you integrate, you can now import teachers, students, and classes from Apple School Manager into your mobile device management system. Your class roster, and that's what I understand as the educator, I want my class roster file information updated and ready through imports. And right now, depending on your SIS, whether it be a daily thing automatically or a daily export-import, you can do that. And what I want is, as classes changes, I want this to be tied into the classes that we're going to use when we start talking about the new Classroom app, Apple Classroom app. Pardon me, because we've had Casper Focus out for years. I'm thrilled Apple's taken this on and put their aspect to it. So sometimes my brain just gets into that phase. And we at Jamf have been trying to support the practitioner, the teacher, with handing them some mobile device management capabilities for 4 years now. And Apple has come into this and they've run with it. So this is what's going to be critical of why we have the Apple School Manager tied to your device management system like the Casper Suite. So now I can go back to the original slide I had wanted to show you. So excuse me for a second. This is what happens when you are thinking non-linearly. And that's why questions don't actually bother me that much, because I tend to look at the audience and decide where I go. And unfortunately, I have a screen right now, so I'm just trying to think as you might be. So I'm going to come back to this. Now that you've got them synchronized together, the Apple School Manager is tied into whatever you have for a mobile device management system, we want to talk about configuring the devices before they get in the student's hands. What do you want the iPad screen to look like? What privileges? And I like to look at them privileges. I will admit, if you go into most systems, they're called restrictions. But let's talk about the concept of I got a third grader who's earned privileges. He's earned the camera. These students have earned the App Store. And how, in fact, if we want to, as you're in a classroom, I can actually manage distractions in the classroom if I want to get students' attention. How can we do that and be prepared to do that? And some of this is Apple School Manager has created the link to your device management system. And now you're taking off with the other capabilities Apple came out with this spring to summer in their original 9.3 release. Mm-hmm. And I'm into iOS 10 now, so my brain is onto that. But personalizing this experience, you now have the ability to show certain apps for certain users. You even have the ability to put certain apps into the dock. So imagine this capability before you've handed iPads out, that you've decided a certain group of students will have the dock pre-set up for them for the most common apps they use. Maybe a certain student gets to see certain apps and the other one doesn't. It's a critical component to success of being able to change this on an occurring basis as the student learns and as they move through school policies. Maybe they move through student digital citizenship plan, and as the school chooses to roll things out. So what I wanted to point out here is you are not setting these devices up at the Apple School Manager phase. You're connecting it to the device management system, and from there you can decide what it's going to be like out of the box or when you first turn on, and you can change this as you go. Changing, in fact, is just a screenshot that basically shows I've changed. This particular student now has the dock arranged for them, and yes, they only have 6 apps showing up, but we've arranged that iPad. We can have that on a shared use experience. Imagine moving a cart between classrooms. A 3rd grader is using it 1 hour and a 5th grader is using it another hour. You may have 40 apps on that iPad, but when the 3rd grader logs in with their managed Apple ID, you can have it so it's a specific dock, specific apps are showing, and when they get out and then that 5th grader logs into the iPad, they've got their own experience. And it's back to that, having that customized, that personalized experience. It isn't just with them saving their information and being secure. You can actually decide on a shared use what they're going to see. And of course, we can do that on a one-to-one also. I may have some students seeing different docs, perhaps. We really want to get into this personalization. And when I mentioned the distraction thing, it's one of the new capabilities is this notifications. You may want older students to have notifications, while younger students, you don't want notifications to show up. And you can manage that aspect and keep students focused on what they're doing, the learning, without these minor little interruptions that usually just cause questions unnecessarily to tell them to hit ignore. And we can bypass a lot of that now. Of course, we can get things set up on the back end like email. We can get things like the Wi-Fi set up. But we don't want the mail necessarily be notifying them constantly throughout the day if we choose to not have that going on. When we get down, to the nitty-gritty, it really is what do you want to do. And some of this webinar is to share with you that we are so far beyond the one way and only way in setting the devices up in August and walking away till holiday break or the next summer. We have this capability of changing this on the fly, hands-free, once you've connected. And there's that slide where I said we've connected the two together. Your Apple School Manager with the devices that you put under management, the apps and content that you purchase, and the Apple IDs, the Manos Apple IDs. Let's move on to purchasing and syncing. And, in the past, certainly if you purchased apps anyways, you didn't have the ability to retain them. You can retain the ownership of apps now. Ebooks that you can purchase are still, held down to that individual user and owned, and you can't take that back. But for right now, that's saving so many districts so much money by being able to distribute apps and pull them back. We want to take a look at which apps the students are going to be able to use, and know that we can change that as we go. The teacher classes is this part that I wanted to mention. We don't just pull in the users from Apple School Manager that's tied to your SIS just for distributing apps. We're now putting them into classrooms. And some of you, if you are former or Casper Suite customers, you may have been using Casper Focus and you know about this capability of creating classes, assigning a teacher to it, and then the teacher being able to go onto their iPad and manage students' iPads on the fly in the classroom. I recognize that's not a new concept for everybody. However, we get all of that set up through the device management system by bringing in those accounts. So it's important that those users and teachers go into your system and the classes go into your system out of that Apple School Manager. And sometimes I get to a slide and I realize I've probably beaten that several times, and you get this idea. The point I really want to stress here is that reliance on that MDM. I know I heard some people when they first heard about Apple School Manager, they're like, oh, great, I'll be able to manage. It's like, well, actually, you're getting the information gathered in one spot, but you still need and rely heavily on that device management tool in order to make these things work once they're out there. For instance, the Classroom, which I'm not showing off Apple Classroom app. I know I think there may already be a question that, oh, I thought that's what you're showing here. And Apple School Manager is the system to get things ready and up and running. The Classroom app's another story, and I rely a little bit on Apple to show that. We do have some material showing it off. I love showing it off, but personally, I want to show off the capabilities of MDM bring to it. Photos is one of those. Something we didn't have with our Casper Focus app is you could have the student's name, but it was just a picture of an iPad. Now, through your, it's not always through your SIS system. Most schools have some database of their student pictures. And this is an important piece, that it's secure, and that Apple's requiring some certificates to go through. And it's really important that that concept is thought out. When I talk about people getting ready for this, take this part seriously, because Apple does and we do. You know, pictures of students are an important piece. So Apple really does ensure there's this certification process that goes from you to them to us. And we're going to help so the photos go from whatever photo server you're probably using, because if you have 6 or 7 different systems, from the lunch system, food service system, to the student information, to your whatever you do the students when they come in and check attendance, they're going to have the pictures all being pulled from some server. Well, what we do is we help connect that into our system so then they show up. And when a teacher is using the Classroom app, they get the pictures of the students to show up. When they're using shared iPads, you want the pictures of the student to show up. I mean, it's great for a kindergartner to find their picture. I mean, certainly they're getting to learn how to read their name. But it also, on this end, think about the teacher's end of having the photos of the students with the name. Me personally, it was one of my biggest challenges with 120-something kids coming through my classroom, on a daily basis. I tried as hard as I could to get kids' names. This is actually going to enable that, to have it right there in my face as I'm walking around the classroom. So I actually really appreciate this. But it does rely on connecting that through the device management system to have that working. We have some prerequisites for the photos. I did stress already to certificates. It's just, these are the things you want to make sure you have. And this is specific to JAMP, and I know there's a dozen or maybe a dozen, probably, actually I think I saw 9 on Apple's website, of device management systems that came out supporting these features right away when Apple did. There may be more now, but with JAMP, you have to have a certain version of our software, our server, and most people just have that updated automatically. You have a web server with your files, and you have the certificate. And again, I really stress that a little bit because it's something I want people should have on their checklist. If you don't know if you have it, you're talking to your MDM company, which would be JAMP, if you have that, and you'd be talking to the Apple to make sure you have that aspect ready to go. Now that we have this, we want to start making things happen automatically, and that's the magic of connecting these abilities of the settings you want for the students, the apps you want, and the books you want down to the teacher and the student level. We can do that with configuration profiles for the apps and then also the books. And I don't want to get too much into the MDM side of it, but this is the concept that you're going to be able to do because you have Apple School Manager all set up and ready to go. We're going to get into the actual deploying the devices. The considerations. First of all, I would point back to there's some great implementation guides by Apple. If this is your first time doing it, you can get people in. We have rollout plans that get into extreme detail of how people have actually laid out their facilities to have stations. I'm not getting into that level of detail here. It's just some top-level considerations. You want to make a plan for handing out the devices to students and teachers. Consider multiple stations, as I mentioned, and we certainly have that. We have some diagrams. The workflow for getting that process. We used to have in the app, the managed Apple ID takes away that station of going through when the parent is setting up and signing up for the Apple ID. It's great to be able to eliminate that station in most cases. Device management begins with enrolling that device, and you choose the user initiated, which we can have a user go through. And a one-to-one situation, a lot of people have that. Students already have a login account. That device comes up, they put in their username, and the device then goes through the startup process. And after that's done, it appears just like the school decided it wanted for each different student. Certainly you can have settings that go across all 7th graders or 5th graders, but you can get that down to that individual. Then we have the, the zero touch, where it's that perhaps that shared use where you choose the zero touch and it just gets booted up and ready up and running for the end user. How you choose to deploy these really matters. We can get it down to when that person goes in and they put in their username and password. They're not doing anything else, or you can leave all of those little checkbox that Apple comes up. Do you want to use Siri? There are certain things that have to be in there on the back end, but most of those are choices that you can then hide from the user just to streamline that process. So one of the things about the getting things going, I feel like I jumped ahead. Excuse me for just a second. I want to make sure, and that's one of the things about doing these things live. I always say in the very beginning, I'm going to make a mistake somewhere, and there's one of my systems IT guys that work with me that kind of chuckles when I do. I felt like I got ahead of myself a little bit. I actually ran through that deployment stuff quicker than I expected to, and I wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything. And I guess this is the point that I was getting to is, Apple has some great services. I've highlighted some concepts, but I'm tired of going things alone, starting from scratch. So many times in my last school district, I saw people, our neighboring districts, doing things for the first time. I like to learn vicariously. I certainly like to make my own decisions. I'll read 5 books and take something from each one. Let's get out there and ask other people what they're doing. The best practices for helping get set up. We have help at JAMP. We've got some people who their IT department are they don't need hardly any getting and going. They're all good to go. Apple has some services. Most of the device management. JAMP has some services for getting people going that haven't done this before. Getting the classroom services with iOS 9.3, Apple School Manager deployments. We can help your organization get up to speed with the new concepts. We have some other webinars. The classroom app is something that is pretty self-explanatory once you get up and running. However, you might need that little extra help of getting that running, and JAMP can certainly do that. We have some abilities to get people started. What I would suggest highly, doesn't matter what MDM you currently have. It doesn't matter if you don't have a mobile device management, you've already ruled the Casper suite out. We have this JAMP Nation with 35,000 users on it, and most of them are customers, but some aren't. And they're talking about all these processes of what they're doing. Certainly, if you're one of those schools that are going through the process because you've done this stuff before and you're migrating, then I'd really encourage you to get out there and get the help from other people and ask for their assistance and let them know what you're doing. We've covered some things in a broad scope today, including new ways for personalized learning experience for students. And I've got webinars on just that topic of how you can really mass customize one student's iPad compared to the others and change that easily. And we didn't get into it. It's more of the realization that Apple School Manager can help make this happen. We've talked about the enrollment, how you get into the Apple School Manager, and how now you're going to have the device management, the volume purchase, and you're going to have student Apple IDs, managed Apple IDs right in one portal to help you get going and to share that capabilities with other people. Because I certainly know my special ed director did not want to give up her purchasing ability for apps just because they were no longer called applications and they're called apps. She still wanted to be able to manage their funds. My math department wanted to be able to manage their funds. So having that ability to have additional people in there. We talked about how important it's going to be for setting up teachers and students in the classes and how in the end it's going to benefit you for doing that. The capabilities of being able to hone down to that individual person or getting the classroom app up and using for the classroom management are going to be really useful tools in helping to transition some teachers as they go digital that need some tools to help them. But quite frankly, even though I've been using technology in classrooms for decades, I still need to give an exam once in a while. And being able to put a student into an app or potentially with the device management, putting them into multiple apps, I still need to be able to do that. And my deployment to users, getting things into the hands of users, is not a once-a-year type of thing. It's an ongoing. And so In summary, that's really the points that I wanted to express, is that you realize Apple School Manager and the combination of your device management are going to give you these abilities on a day-to-day basis. I alluded to giving you more help. We're all about helping the community that's out there using Apple products. We have lots of different webinars on integrating these things. If you're brand new to it, we have some more advanced if you're down that path already. I'm just going to stop right now and say thank you. I feel like I wanted to say more. I will end with something I wanted to say in the beginning of how this was intended really to give a high-level overview. This does not preclude you from going out to the Apple site, and they have some amazing information on deployment. They have their own, here's what you need to know and how to get ready. My encouragement is that you go and use those resources, but also know that you have people here at Jamf that can help you, and you want to involve your Apple team. Thank you so much. I'm going to switch it back over to Andrew, and we'll take on some questions.
All right, terrific. Well, thank you so much, Dave. That was extremely interesting. And we do have a bunch of questions that have come in from the audience. Some of them were answered online directly to the participants, but looking over at them, I see that they may well be very useful to the broader audience. So I'm going to turn to one of those questions now. One of the attendees said that they have previously used Apple Configurator and are now trying to migrate to Apple School Manager and are looking for directions on how to do this, something that will make their deployment faster and easier. Can you give them any advice on that?
Sure. Let me start off first by saying I brought someone along with me. I have a solution engineer, one of my technical experts within my team that I rely heavily on. Nick Thompson is here with me. He's probably been responding to some of you, and I may let him just jump in on some of these questions that I could answer, but I'm just mentioning that to begin with. Nick is here. Welcome, Nick.
Thanks, Dave. So anybody out there that's using Apple Configurator right now knows that Apple Configurator relies on you physically plugging devices in over USB to a Mac. And, that's great for a small deployment of iPads, but it's really hard to scale Apple Configurator. Again, a free app from Apple. If you're looking to migrate over to Apple School Manager, it's actually pretty simple. Simply sign up for Apple School Manager at school.apple.com. And we also got the question of how much does Apple School Manager cost? Apple School Manager is a free program from Apple. So keep in mind, when we say Apple School Manager, that is a program, a free program that Apple offers. So once you've signed up for Apple School Manager, you buy all of your devices from either Apple directly or from your reseller, whoever, and essentially those devices that you buy then get flagged in the program in Apple School Manager. It says, these devices are owned by your organization. You then use our product, our mobile device management product that we call the Casper Suite here, to then manage everything. So really jumping from Apple Configurator to Apple School Manager plus an MDM is pretty easy. You just sign up for everything, and we help you get everything all set up that you would need. And that includes doing apps and books that you'd like to get onto these devices. It includes doing the fun zero-touch deployments where you can literally just turn the device on for the first time and it automatically starts talking back to the MDM server so it grabs all the stuff you need. And then once things are all deployed, you can use that classroom app that Dave was talking about earlier to do some classroom management inside of there. And it's a little tricky because all these names sound so familiar, but it's good to kind of separate them out here.
But Nick brought up a good point, and I'm not sure if this is a question, but I definitely think it should be pointed out. I probably should have pointed this out. Apple's Classroom app, the classroom management tool, similar to what we have for Casper Focus, is also free. There is no additional cost from Apple for that Classroom app to be used by however many hundreds or dozens or hundreds or thousands of classrooms and teachers and students you have. This Apple School Manager capability, another piece provided from Apple. And I take it for granted because Jamf has not charged extra for our classroom management piece, and this integration aspect it's not an added cost in our bundle. If they're a Casper Suite customer, we're not charging extra for this this connection with Apple. And I guess I don't know that that's true with everything. I certainly know with another platform, the management is one thing, the classroom management is another cost, and so those are certainly things in your preparation to be asking. And great question about the cost. There is no, even for our added aspect.
Yeah. It should also be noted too, Apple School Manager only works in a handful of countries. I want to say it's about 26 countries at the moment. Apple School Manager is necessary for some of these cool new features that Apple's coming out with, but it doesn't preclude you from still using iPads in the classroom in general. So just know that it's not in every single country out there, but it is in a lot of the major ones.
Andrew, other questions?
Sure. That you just been talking a little bit about integration, particularly between the MDM and the Apple School Manager. We have a question from someone who's also wondering about integration with a student information system. Is there a tie-in between an SIS and the MDM? Is that possible, and does that happen?
So that is the key piece that we have, is that you can have an automated. A lot of systems today have the ability to where they just automatically talk once a day and sync that information. Apple currently has that with some student information systems. They are working towards more. However, you do have the ability to export files and import to get that up and running. So from our perspective at Jamf, and I'm going to share this, we've had our Casper Focus that needed that student information system data, and we've had this for 4 years. There are some people will hear that there's a company out there that is free to schools that will do this integration. I do want to share that from our perspective, we know that's hundreds of thousands of dollars to $1 million a year for just even a company like ours. So we created our own export utility that a school exports their stuff from there, that automatically imports to ours at night. And in essence, that is what Apple is creating, this automatic flow between. And like I said, they have a couple right now that's automatic. The rest right now are that go get it and upload it. But you should expect that more to come online. But they definitely have some integration, and they're working on it.
Yeah, and just to clarify, the SIS integration happens with Apple within Apple School Manager. It doesn't actually happen within the Casper Suite. And Apple, I don't see a list of SISs that Apple has on hand. I know they are targeting the kind of major SISs first. You'd have to reach out directly to Apple to see which ones they support directly, but I don't think they've actually publicly listed exactly which SISs that they support.
Yeah, there is a good tool on their website for the support of it that I believe will actually mention the couple on there, and I've seen some letters to customers telling them that we've had this out. Again, I go back to you start with your particular SIS and contact them. It's just as much for them to collaborate with Apple as it is for Apple to come up with that. So, good question. And I did allude to the Casper Focus is because there's countries that don't have the device enrollment program. There are school districts that have older technology like iPad 2. I'm not sure if that question came up today. It came up before that Casper Focus works with iPad 2s and with people that don't have device enrollment. So there are some of our customers who are splitting off, and some of their devices, because there is a device requirement for the classroom app. For the shared use model. There is that requirement. There is actually for also the classroom app, and that's again something somebody needs to check with their inventory, with their Apple people, of what does work. Andrew?
Okay, well, terrific. Thank you so much. Now, I want to just step back now to really go back to the basics. In your summary, Dave, you talked about the first steps being discuss the device experience, and then enroll in Apple School Manager, and then move on to configuring. I wonder if you could go into a little bit more detail. One of our attendees said that they've just got 30 new iPads, and they have a classroom they want to use them in. They really want to know what are those first few steps that they need to take to get this thing rolling.
Okay, well, certainly it kind of depends on what they, This is a conversation that I highly encourage to break out of the silos. Unfortunately, sometimes in school departments, IT departments can be going down something at the same time as a teacher might be doing something. I think the first step is to make sure that we're communicating with other people in our org, because you might find out that you didn't even know if you're in a program where you just got a grant and have these, you may already have a device management system within your organization, and that's that communication between people. Also, if you want to pilot something, once you go to get some stuff up and running, the worst thing that can have happen is something needed to be configured on the network that didn't. So I would encourage that first and foremost, is that we bring those groups together. We talked in the very beginning about if you're brand new to this, this is where you have that path of connecting with Apple to get your Apple School Manager account. It sounds like in this particular case that is what you need to do, and so there's a documentation to go to Apple's site to get that, and I would certainly take a few minutes to read through theirs. Nick, do you want to add something?
Yeah, just from a technical standpoint, you get some iPads for your class. That's awesome. You want to start looking at how do I want to manage these things. If it's just a small number of them, you could look at something like Apple Configurator, but again, the downfalls of Configurator are you have to hardwire everything in to update things. You want to be able to update them wirelessly. You want to be able to do some of these great new things that Apple's coming out with. So I would sign up for Apple School Manager first, again, free program. And then I would investigate a mobile device management solution, MDM solution. And of course, I'm going to be biased and say that the Casper Suite is a really good MDM solution to look into because we integrate with everything that Apple's doing. And so once you sign up for Apple School Manager, find your MDM solution. Again, I would highly recommend looking at us. Then you can start managing these devices in a wireless capability where I don't have to go out and touch every single one of them. And then once they're all managed, then I can start doing these other cool things like using the Classroom app to do, locking the iPad into one app at a time, or being able to see what the kids are doing on their iPad. So it's a multi-step processor.
Involve the person from Apple that you're purchasing the device. If you've already purchased them, it's one thing. Getting them into the system by already signing up for this Apple School Manager and having these capabilities. But before you buy it, you can go back and apply a purchase order to it, but I would encourage you to bring that person into the mix. And absolutely, Jamp, the great thing is you could have someone come on and give you a full demo and show you all the capabilities you're going to do and help. Pretty much that hour demo is going to get you to make sure you have the right things when you sign up for, and it is, it's not that we walk you through that process of the Apple School Manager signing those things up, but we have that checklist of here's what you need to do. And I think Nick covered it really great, but it starts there.
Okay.
Andrew?
Terrific. All right. Well, going to move over to the app side. Someone from the audience wanted to ask where they can find suggested apps for teachers to use in the classroom. But I want to add to that, have you discussed a little bit the management of those apps? Because sometimes an app will be recommended by the district or someone higher up. In some cases, a teacher is going to come and say, I would really love to use this app in my classroom. Can you talk about how, first of all, where they can find some of these apps, but also how those are then managed and to a certain extent sanctioned and introduced into the system?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's one I ask every district I visit because it will be slightly different. Some places have very structured, and I don't want to say rigid, just to say structured policies for purchasing, because it's gone back to the textbook and the app day that people were spending hundreds of thousands of dollars and it didn't work on their system. Some places don't have any process in place, and so that goes back to involving people across the organization with that decision and finding out what that is. A lot of times it's the building principal and they've either set it up front, here's how you can do the process. We have the ability in our system for people someone can look up and see what apps they already have and how many licenses. And that's why I encourage people to communicate both ways, because you might find out they already have this in their volume purchase program. They can see how many seats they already have. They can see that they have so many available. If they're free apps, the back end can distribute, still go get them for you and distribute them down and make it easy to get to people. But the backup on recommendations, I've gone to so many events where it's like my favorite 50 apps. I like to get into the why. I like to go to some places that have models for the SAMR model that align apps based upon your instructional or pedagogy. And so there are definitely some great sites out there that have it. My first place, though, is Common Sense Media. They are a great resource to go in to their system and look for different types of content, that gives feedback from actual teachers to how people utilize it. That's my first resource, is Common Sense Media. But then Kathy Schrock, who's been around for, she's very young. She must have started very young, but she's been around for years, and she has some apps, and she kind of shows them around everything from the SAMR model to what's called the TPAC model, to how these different apps fall into play for helping improve student learning. And that's vital for me, is that we look at places that evaluate apps. As far as the deployment and the decision-making, we are trying to make that so that we can involve the IT is able to make it happen, but it comes from the educational department. And that is so personalized in your own school department. Usually I would say that there's a committee, because when it comes to funding, the other thing is we have to watch size of how much. The capacity is not a problem, but a consideration when you're putting apps on devices. And so within our system, we can have students access to the App Store or not, or schools, a lot of times they put on what we call self-service, which creates their own internal App Store. And if a teacher requests something, it can be placed into this school-based App Store for students to go get, or they can have it deployed directly onto a student's device. So I guess my advice is that it starts with communication at your school level with how they do that workflow. And my encouragement is to, if you do want to do an app and you want an app, if you argue your point versus a pedagogical reference, you're more likely to get that app. If you just send a list of 25 apps to somebody, it seems like that's just you might run into a hesitancy immediately. And it's not that if I was a teacher, the IT doesn't trust it. It's like, imagine how many thousands of apps they might be adding to the system that could be bogging down the devices. So that's why I encourage coming about it from more of a instructional value for that app. And sorry, a long answer, Andrew.
No, that's terrific. Thank you for the detail. I'll switch gears again and come back to another question from the audience. Coming back to the managed Apple IDs, do they have to use them?
So, good question. And the thing is, it's going to be, how are they going to want to use them? Why would you want them and why wouldn't you? Certainly, they provide a huge value for under 13, and they can actually be migrated back to or up to regular access for students later on, and they could transition off with them. They need to be used if you're doing that shared, that capital S shared, where you want the student to log on to a shared iPad, have their access to their content, hand it to a different student, and another student accesses it. That's where it has to be used. You need that managed Apple ID for that. In other capabilities for the classroom app, with a teacher app where I can manage my iPads and I can pause them to get their attention, you can use that app in either the one-to-one environment or in the shared use, and it doesn't require, since you can use it in a one-to-one, the students do not have to have the managed Apple ID. So we're going to have a lot of people who already have students, they're already running, they already have their own Apple ID. You can use the classroom app without managed Apple IDs. I'm just going to end that there and say that any further definition, I would rely back to Apple for somebody. But that's pretty straightforward clarification of what you need to know.
Okay. All right. Let me come back to a question you did answer before, and maybe you gave a complete answer and I just missed it. You said that it was at the moment the Apple School Manager was limited to I think you said 26 countries maybe. How would someone go about the registration process where they have to choose the institution if they're not in one of those 26 countries, or is this just completely it's not even possible at this point?
Yeah, and first of all, Apple does have all that information. It's most of the, there are a handful of countries that are beginning using technology that don't have the volume purchase program, and it usually comes down to some kind of agreement and probably contractual stuff within the country for purchasing, and then that device enrollment program. The good news is we have customers in those countries, and they're able to, like I said, depending on their device that they have, we can get them using. Supervision is this need that people have to get, so even people out in those other countries can still take advantage of a lot of these capabilities. And the Casper Suite has some alternatives for them, so that's an important aspect. But at the highest level, if you are not in a country that doesn't have it, it is at your Department of Education and at your governmental level with that contract with them and Apple. Like I said, the good news is we have certain other ways we can still help people do a lot of what they're trying to accomplish.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you for clarifying that. We have about 4 minutes left, so maybe we can squeeze in a couple more questions. One is, do we need DEP for Apple Classroom or Casper Focus?
Yeah, so I'll take that one. This is Nick again. So, for those who aren't familiar with DEP, that is the Device Enrollment Program. It's a program that is prior to Apple School Manager. You may have heard that phrase out there before. And what's great about Apple School Manager is it is basically taking DEP and rolling it into Apple School Manager. So if you want to use the features like Apple Classroom or Casper Focus, you actually don't need those specific things. What DEP and that aspect of Apple School Manager lets you do is it just lets you deploy iPads in a zero-touch manner. Meaning you give it to somebody, they turn it on for the first time, and it automatically enrolls. But if you want to use the Classroom app, if you want to use Casper Focus, our version of the Classroom app that existed before the Classroom app, they just need to be managed by an MDM, which would be us, and then they can talk to each other all through that framework.
So the key, and this is where I'm going to read it, is supervision has to be added on to the devices. It's a management capability called supervision, and you either have to physically go in and do that, which is a lot of hands-on work, and people avoided DEP, Device Enrollment Program, or through the device enrollment with the Apple School Manager. That can be done at the moment of purchase in the back end, hands-free. And I'm going to stress this. Without Device Enrollment Program, even if I do all this physical labor and getting that set up, it can be wiped. It can be erased. The benefit of device enrollment through Apple means that we won't have the debacle somebody had at a huge district about 4 years ago where students just erased it and they could do whatever they wanted. DEP, device enrollment through Apple, means that if you turn off the device and it's in an MDM, it's going to come right back up and you can't get around. You can't delete the restrictions, if I want to use that word, or profiles that are put on there by the school department. And that's why it's so important. So true, you can go in and physically set up supervision manually and still use Apple Classroom. Would you want to do that? You really want to do that. And that's why I said for the people that probably are not on this call that are in the countries that don't have it, that is the dilemma. It is absolutely worth your time and effort if you're a school department in the United States or another country that has it. It is worth your time and effort setting that up because that means you can do everything, like Nick was saying, hands-free, and the students cannot go in and delete it and get around it. That's the key message.
Okay, terrific. All right, well, that is actually all the time that we have left today. So if any of you asked a question that we were unable to get to today, someone from the Jamf software team will follow up and get you some answers. So as we wrap up, I want to thank Dave Saltmarsh and also Nick Thompson for really an excellent presentation. I'd also like to thank Jamf for its support. A final reminder, we will send out email to all attendees when the recording of the webinar is ready. So thank you, and this concludes today's webcast. Goodbye.